My name is Dr. Mara Ellison, forensic pathologist at the Riverside Medical Examiner's Office, a concrete hive stapled to the edge of the old shipyard, where gulls orbit forever and the river breathes iron through the grout. Our autopsy theater sits one level down from the street, a bright white box with a square mouth of a drain and a clock that keeps time too honestly. It is a room built to strip stories down to bone and measurement. That's why I chose it. I don't go in for visitations or signs. Give me angles of impact, air in a chamber, minerals in blood. I believe in what stays after rinsing. The night the witness sat up on my table, rain flattened the courtyard and turned the dumpster lids into dark ponds. The building had that Sunday taste cleaner, steel, the ghost of lemon. We just finished intake on a suspected homicide, male, 30s, unknown at intake, brought in from the alley behind a convenience store. Head trauma, defensive nicks along the forearms. The ER note said asystole on arrival, time of death 2308, abrasion on the left cheekbone shaped like a coin. No wallet, no phone, a folded receipt in his back pocket, ink sluiced to blur. Jules, my night tech, closed the toe tag around his ankle and set the clipboard on the counter with her steady left-right rhythm. She'd been with me long enough that we shared a vocabulary without words, the way she angled the light to spare me a glare, the way I lifted a shoulder half an inch when I wanted a tray moved. She threaded a hair behind her ear and said without looking up, "You going home, Doc?" "I'll start him," I said. "Sleep's as good down here as anywhere." She snorted, the tired kind, not unkind, and checked the Vacutainer labels. "I'll pull the samples." "Want coffee?" "God, no." She left for the cooler. I rolled the table beneath the light and drew the sheet to the sternum. He was ordinary in the way death makes all faces cousins. Brown hair clipped short, a shaving nick under the jawline, an apology to no one. Chest hair there and not there, geography refusing pattern. Under the overhead skin loses color the way the sky forgets twilight. It's always the lips that give it away, the gray that spreads like weather. I said what I always say, because ritual keeps me from thinking I am a machine. I'll be careful. I let my palms hover an inch above his chest to warm the gloves. The theater hum scattered. The clock paired another minute. The drain glinted. He moved. Not the lurch people imagine. The body is not a stage for jump scares. It was a ripple, tight as a shiver, a small lift at the sternum. I stepped back on reflex and then forced myself forward, 2 fingers to the carotid because training is a muscle. A thread. Weak, wrong, but present. His eyelids parted a narrow degree. Brown under broken vessels bloomed like a map. He inhaled, coughed once, a spoiled sound, then let air out in a shape that was almost a word. "Jules," I called, and my voice came out not loud and not calm. She slid through the door on soles that learned wet floors the hard way, and then she was at my shoulder, pinning the sheet, finding a vitals cart that we almost never use in here because they are for the living. "Calling it upstairs," she said, already thumbing with her elbow because her hands were busy. "Sir," I said, because names are a currency the dead don't spend. "You're in the medical examiner's office. You were hurt. Can you tell me your name?" His mouth moved like he was rolling an unfamiliar taste around. When sound came, it was sandpaper pulled across whisper. "You moved the clock." I glanced at our clock by reflex. It hadn't moved. Big round face with black ticks, stainless rim, honest seconds. "Which clock?" I asked. "The brown one," he said, frowning so slightly it looked like an idea. "With a crack at the 9. The minute hand sticks on the 7 and you have to tap it." She tapped it. She had a blue rubber band on her wrist. I kept my voice inside its lane the way you steer a car through wind. "Who tapped it?" "Doctor." "Not you." He swallowed. It made an audible click that sent a ghost pain down my own throat. "Where's the green tile?" "The black border." "The faucet with the copper stain." Jules and I traded a look we'd never practiced, her what the hell, my don't move. He kept offering a room we did not own, piece by ordinary piece. Green tile, black border, a wall clock with a crack through the 9 that needed tapping when the minute hand hesitated. A pathologist who wore a blue rubber band and called everyone Bud not affectionate, just standard. It was like he'd woken on our table and kept expecting the right set to lower from the ceiling. Who hurt you? I asked, not because I expected a tidy answer, but because it is the only honest question our office earns. He blinked slow, coins dropping. Came down 2 flights, he said. Not today. Before. Door with wire glass. Sign said authorized. Coffee mug with the handle glued back on. Someone called me kid and I wasn't a kid. The table had a blue paint flake near the drain. The woman, she was short with a scar on her cheek. She said, "You can rest now, we'll show them how." Jules' hands paused on the oxygen tubing. Her fingers went to her own cheek, mirroring the wrong side, and returned to work. "What did you see?" I said, softer, as if volume could coax him to the parts that mattered. "The clock stuck," he said. "At the 7. She tapped it so she wouldn't be late. I told her the man had a ring that wasn't his, and she said the word consent like a joke for herself. The tile had little chips. The grout was black where the mop doesn't reach. It's not this. This is lemon." His face creased contempt for the smell of our cleaner or grief for a room he recognized, and this one he didn't. The transport didn't make it. He went with a soft surrender that some do when the body has filed its brief and lost interest in the appeal. Jules ran the algorithm because she had to lie to herself for the right amount of time. Then she met my eyes and shook her head once, a small refusal of magic. We sat with him in the brightness. It felt like he had made us witnesses and left halfway through. "Green tile," Jules said finally. "And a cracked 9 on the clock," I said. "A pathologist who taps it when a minute hand sticks." "And a scar," she said. We did what we have to do twice when told once. We pronounced him a second time. Upstairs, someone wrote a note that admitted nothing and pretended this sort of thing doesn't unspool behind closed doors. We moved him to the cooler because where else does the story go? Jules entered the log. I cleaned the table like I could erase a mistake. I try hard to be the kind of person who writes something down rather than tell it like a campfire tale. I opened the office's record system and typed city morgue and demolished and tile like a person misusing a machine to ask a human question. 40 minutes later, I had a list of dates and addresses. 20 minutes after that, I called a man I didn't want to call. "Yeah," said the voice. Gravel aged into charm. "It's Ellison over at Riverside." "Doctor," he said, making it weigh a pound. "Been a minute." "Detective Boyd," I said, giving him his old title because retirement hadn't changed the way he carried it. "You worked the old city morgue, didn't you? Before it moved. Before they tore it down. I worked next to it more than in it." "Why? What color were the tiles?" He didn't laugh. "Green. Black stripe along the wall. And the clock. Big round bastard," he said with surprising fondness. "Cracked through the 9. You'd smack it when the minute stuck. Elsie would smack it." A pause. "Dr. Markham." Scar on her cheek. "You didn't forget Dr. Markham if you met her." I had not met Dr. Elsie Markham. She died in 2002, long before I learned how to keep a straight face and an unshaking hand. But I knew her signature. Every ME here does. She wrote like she cut, decisive, impatient with detours. "What happened to the place when they tore it down?" I asked. "What always happens," he said. "Auction. Dumpster. Memory. Why are you asking me about tile?" "We had a oddity," I said, because it was the least wrong word. "A witness who described a different room than the one he was sitting in." "You're going to make me get my keys," he said, and hung up. He showed 20 minutes later in a rumpled jacket that smelled like coffee and the engine oil you get from leaning where you shouldn't. He still moved like a man who knows which floorboards complain. I took him into the theater. He lifted his chin and looked around with the hound dog expression of men who have built their lives out of seeing. Bright, he said. Different. World apart, he said, then almost smiled. I'll do that. He walked to our clock, stood under it while the minute hand crossed the 7 without drama. You can get a man to tell you anything if he wants to be in the right story, he said. He wasn't inventing, I said. Heat made me hear my voice more than I liked. He named her. The Scar. That scar was famous, Boyd said, not unkind. Old Morgue Doc took a piece of a buzzer wheel to the face when they used to haul bodies like junk. Wore it like some folks wear medals. You got a name on your witness? Not yet. He looked at my hands. He has a way of making silence feel like a witness itself. You're a skeptic. You're allowed to ask a crazy question now and then. What's the crazy question? Did he say anything else? I told him. Calendar with bathing suit girls stubbornly turned to April from Forever March, the blue paint flake near the drain, the coffee mug with the handle glued back on, consent said like a private joke. He rearranged his face around that last one. That's an Elsie word, he said. She'd make DAs cry with consent. There was a boyfriend once who liked to borrow rings and stories. She said the word like a gavel. Do you have photos? I asked, too quickly. Of the room. He did, because he is the sort who refuses to let the world lie about itself, and because old cases keep shrines in boxes. In the conference room, he laid them out like a deck he knew where to cut. Green tile, black border. A drain with a blue paint flake like an island on a map. A clock with a taped crack at the 9. Dr. Elsie Markham, lab coat sleeves bunched past her elbows, a thin scar like a river across her cheekbone, blue rubber band on her wrist. Not affectionate, standard. Jules stood in the doorway and swore under her breath, not blasphemy so much as gratitude for a correct answer. You were there, Boyd said to the pictures, like a man greeting a dog in a dream. To me, what do you want it to mean? I don't know, I said, which was both true and not enough. Half the time we tell families we don't know and mean we can't say yet. This feels like the other half. Maybe he saw it once, Boyd said, turning grief into something his back could carry. Maybe his brain went to the room it knew when it was inventing an end. Maybe, I said. The word stuck like a minute hand. We worked the case like good people. We canvassed the alley where the clerk said he went down. We pulled footage from cameras that pointed poorly. We harvested witness statements that contradicted each other like siblings. We fingerprinted and waited for the system to answer the most basic prayer. Tell us who this is. It answered. Adrian Pierce, 34. 2 addresses in the last 5 years, both within a bus ride of the Old City Morgue's footprint. No record. A parking ticket that had outlived the car. His autopsy was a study in ugly simplicity. One blow, left posterior parietal, sufficient to fracture and bleed his logic away. The angle favored someone standing to his left, close. The defensive cuts were skinny insults, not fights. The abrasion under the cheekbone was coin round, copper oxide under the nail of his 3rd finger on the right hand. Lungs were clean. Stomach held 2 beers, half a hot dog, mustard, the last meal of a man with no idea he had to savor it. I dictated the findings into a microphone that refuses drama. The theater stayed itself, bright, honest lemon. The clock went about its business. That night, alone, I went into the archives. The room makes its own weather, paper, dust, the ghost of wet cardboard. We keep an altar of boxes there, the kind you could mistake for identical if you didn't learn the personality of tape. I found the shelf with E, Markham along the side, fingertips numb from air conditioning and stubbornness. 1993, 1991. 1989, I slid one out and wheeled it to the long table, peeled back the lid. Old morgue cases are a country you can visit but don't move through freely. Photographs of tile where the mop hated to go, grout permanently black, the clock with the taped crack, a Polaroid of the drain where a blue paint flake had balanced like a chipped country. Elsie's handwriting, big and clear, consent is not equal to permission in a margin, a private rule in public ink. At the bottom of the box, a loose Polaroid had adhered to the sheet beneath it with yellowed tape. The drain again. The blue flake. A penny wedged at the lip, heads down, copper worn thin. On the back, in Elsie's hand, drawer B, July. No year. No case number. I took the photo to the theater and set it on the counter under the surgical light. Around it, the room pretended it couldn't participate. The drain under my feet glinted like it wished it could keep a secret. The clock rounded its face and refused metaphor. At 2 a.m, this job becomes a ladder of small decisions you climb because the big ones are sky. I went to the cooler. The shelves rasped gently when pulled. Adrian lay under his sheet like an answer I hadn't learned to form. I had the impulse to apologize for lemon, for bright tile, for the wrong clock. I turned to leave. The cooler lights flickered once. Not dramatic. Buildings cough. But the floor under my shoes changed. Not really, but enough. The suggestion of small squares, edges raised, grit in the grout. And there was a smell, Lysol souring under tobacco, so quick and specific my mouth watered. I stopped because the world had tilted a degree, and that's worth honoring. "Bud," said a woman's voice behind me, warm as an insult from a friend. I turned. No one. The air shrugged. The little light hummed at that pitch that can talk you into believing it a song. Two truths shared my lungs without fighting. I was alone. I was not. Back in the theater, I called Boyd and asked a favor that embarrassed me. Find out if Elsie ever tapped her clock at 7 past. Past what? Just 7 past. He called the next day with a story he pretended to hate. He kicked on at 3:07. Minute hand stuck. Elsie would smack the clock and say, "Don't make me late for the dead." Scared the interns. The ER's note on Adrian's arrival said 23:07. The minute lodged in his mouth like a coin. "Don't think what you're thinking," Boyd said. "Rooms don't take payment. They take people." We got our break the old way. A man running his mouth in a bar met a man who didn't like him. A convenience store clerk, thin, earnest, afraid of being involved, recognized Adrian from a still and said he'd been in earlier with someone in a gray hoodie who'd asked for change for tens like he owed the world a trick. The hoodie carried a logo, Bluebird Laundry. The business had died in '98, 1 block from the footprint of the old morgue. The hoodie was vintage from a thrift store window that kept its ghosts upright on hangers. We brought in a man with a face built for excuses. The ring he fidgeted had a copper coin ground down to blur liberty and date. His prints ghosted on Adrian's bottle. His alibi had knees that knocked. He broke when Jules, who had no reason to be in the room except that she likes to stand where she can see the truth, set Elsie's photo of the penny by the drain on the table and said, in a voice as careful as a hand on wet glass, "Do you know what consent means?" He confessed in the way men do, sideways, self-exonerating, loud where quiet would have been a mercy. He pushed, he didn't mean. He needed change and respect and a story. He kept the ring afterward out of grief, which was an insult to grief. He dragged Adrian toward the alley because alleys were always there for men like him. The DA smiled without showing teeth. The papers turned it into a clean line that never mentioned tile. I finished paperwork and set it in the file we pray never needs to open again for the wrong reason. I slept for a whole 3 hours and dreamed of water with square waves. A week slid by in the work that keeps you from making a religion out of one evening. Overdose. Car. A death at home with all the blinds open. A baby the universe couldn't be bothered to explain. I cleaned the theater more than it needed as if I could unlearn lemon. I told myself not to look at the clock when the minute hand rode the 7. I looked anyway. It crossed easy honest. We identified Adrian formally. His aunt cried in a careful way that said she had loved him with both hands and never figured out how to keep him. He was always trying to fix things with money he didn't have, she said into the room, apology, indictment, obituary. She reached toward the sheet and stopped like she remembered fire. I told her about the ring, and she made the shape of the word consent without sound and then gripped the edge of the metal table until her knuckles went flat. After she left, I lingered. That is my sin if we're keeping tally. I am not good at letting rooms be rooms. I gathered the photos Boyd had shown us and the Polaroid of Elsie's drain and the washer I had found rolled and ringing from drawer B and made a small shrine on the far counter. Not an altar, just a stack of proofs that the world has seen. On a Wednesday at dawn, Boyd came back with a cardboard banker's box and the look of a man indulging a sliver of belief against his better instincts. I pulled a few of Elsie's, he said, setting the box down like it could bark. Public records. No one will sue me for showing you tile. He pulled a photo from the top. Elsie in 3/4 profile, sleeves rolled, scar bright as a blade, wrist under a thick blue rubber band. A mug with a handle glued back on sat at her elbow. On the wall above her shoulder, a calendar of women in bathing suits said April in a font that apologized for nothing. I called one of the old night attendants, he said. Guy named Manny. Retired to Carolina. He said the clock stuck at 7 past and the doc would tap it with a pen cap because the glass cut her once. He remembered the pen cap more than the clock. Memory's a bastard. Did he remember a penny by the drain? Jules asked, looking like she didn't want to give away that the question mattered. He remembered losing change through the cracks, Boyd said. He said he'd hear coins fall sometimes when the building settled. He said the drain was hungry. He made a face at his own story and then shrugged. We tell ourselves things. After they left, I stood in the theater and tried to breathe only air, not meaning. The clock crossed the 7, and I did not move my hand. Lemon softened into the background. I let the room be a room. It didn't last. That night, 3 a.m, the hour buildings admit what they are, the cooler lights again did that quick cuff. I reached for the switch and stopped because my hand had decided to feel instead. The floor announced small squares beneath my soles, grout grit at the edges of my step. Air lifted the hair at the back of my neck with a draft that remembered cigarettes. I waited. I said, I'm here because the thing we owe the dead more than anything is attendance. But a voice said, very near, and either the world was what it is and I was tired enough to hear it, or the world had enough left in it to show me a sliver of a room that was gone. I slid drawer B. It caught the way it had been catching, a hitch that could be friction or something else. Something round rolled and rang on the steel, a sound like a coin in a church plate. Not a penny this time. A washer softened by time, warmed by a story. I picked it up. It held heat the way a hand does after it leaves a doorknob. I set it by the Polaroid and did not write it down. 2 days later, the detective in me, the small one I let live under my white coat, took me walking. The lot where the old municipal morgue had stood is now a jagged bite of grass behind a chain link. Weeds pushed through a thin skim of asphalt that remembers 1996 better than any person. I stood with my hands in my coat pockets and tried to imagine the geometry. Door with wire glass and authorized stenciled in black, stairwell that held its breath, the room with green tile and black border, drain with the blue flake. Clock with the crack that stuttered at 3:07, a woman with a scar who tapped with a pen cap and called people bud because affection had to find a way through a day like that. A man walking a dog gave me the look neighbors give women who stand at fences. He nodded, I nodded. The dog sneezed once and trotted away. The wind smelled like the river and rain. I told myself I'd come for the civic exercise of eyeballing the past, not because I was making a pilgrimage. It felt like both. It felt like I was trespassing on a room that had been kinder to the living and the dead than rooms usually are. At work, I tried to keep my hands on the tasks. I did the baby that no one could name without breaking. I did the old man who had left instructions in a neat envelope that put the lie to the word alone. I did the humdrum and the brutal. I didn't look at the clock when the hand crossed the 7. Sometimes it hesitated a breath. When it did, I wanted to tap it so badly my wrist twitched. I didn't. I am not a believer. On a Monday night, a month after Adrian, a teenage boy came in after a bicycle collision. Physics and asphalt had conspired. We worked like we always work, which is to say we tried to make sense out of what was left and promised his mother we would be careful. The wheels of his bike still smelled like hot rubber in my head. I caught myself listening for the floor to change under my shoes. It didn't. The theater was the theater. Jules, cleaning instruments, said, "Do you ever feel like the room wants something?" "Rooms want housekeeping budgets," I said. She smirked. "I mean, like, attention." "Everything wants attention," I said. "That's how I know I'm alive." She dried the handle of a saw we'd never needed to plug in and didn't look up. Sometimes I hear, "I don't know." Not a voice. A shape of a voice. She set the saw down. It says "but" in the same tone my grandmother used when she made me peel potatoes. I made my mouth into the shape of a joke and left it there until it thawed into something else. "You didn't tell me." "You didn't ask," she said, and smiled so quick I might have imagined it. I thought of Elsie's scar and her pen cap and the Polaroid of the penny by the drain. I thought of a man on my table who had come back long enough to tell us a room we didn't own and a clock we couldn't tap. I thought of Boyd saying rooms take people, not payment. I thought of the washer that rang and warmed my glove like a held hand. You want an answer. You want the right word. Haunting, echo, memory, glitch. You want me to give you a cause you can hold between 2 fingers and feel smug about. I could give you a perfectly polite explanation. The dying brain reaches for scaffolding it knows, the old room, the old doctor, the sound of a clock being disciplined by a hand. The new brain, mine hungry for pattern, builds the rest. Washers turned relic, smells turned visitations, floors turned into tile under rubber soles. None of that would be dishonorable. None of that is untrue. And also this, rooms remember. When the living refuse to carry a detail forward, the place itself becomes the witness. If a person is unlucky or blessed enough to wake briefly in the wrong room on their way out, sometimes they bring the old air with them long enough to finish a sentence. We listen. If we're any good at this work, we don't decide whether the sentence belongs to mystery or to grief. We write down what we can. We keep our hands steady. We released Adrian to his aunt. She signed with a careful hand and whispered something to him in a language I didn't know. I stood a respectful 6 feet back and let her have the room. As she left, she touched the door frame like she wanted the wood to keep his shape from snagging. I thought of the alley that takes men down and the rooms that lift them up enough to speak. After she went, I taped the Polaroid of Elsie's drain inside my locker door, opposite the emergency codes and the phone tree. When I open the door now, the photo meets me, blue flake like a country, penny wedged at the lip, the kind of image that suggests a plan but refuses to name it. Next to it, I stuck a yellow note in my own hand. Consent is not equal to permission. I do not know what I mean by it, not entirely. It feels like I am borrowing a role from a woman who worked under a cracked clock and made interns jump. Some nights I wake at home to the sense of a clock hesitating at 7 past. I lie still and wait for the tap that never comes. The radiator coughs. The house breathes. I count to 60 and then another 60 and then I get up and go to work early. The theater greets me with lemon and steel. The minute hand crosses the 7 clean. I roll the first case under the light and say the sentence I owe, I'll be careful. If Elsie's voice ghosts my ear with a single word, but I don't say anything out loud in answer. I don't have to. The room isn't asking me for belief. It is asking me to be here. That is within my skill set. When the case is done, I peel my gloves and wash and stand at the counter with water drying on the backs of my hands. Sometimes I touch the clock's glass with one finger, not tapping, just feeling the chill. There's a smear near the 9 now. I don't know when it arrived. At 3:07 each night, it catches the light and looks for the blink of a blink, like a crack. I let it be what it wants to be. I let the minute hand do its stubborn work. I let the drain keep its secrets and its photographs. A month after the arrest, I had to testify. The defense lawyer tried to make the revival into a problem for us: chain of custody, pronouncement, competence. I kept my eyes on the jury and told the truth the way this job taught me. We received a body. We observed signs of life. We attempted support. We notified. The subject expired. We performed an autopsy. We found X, Y, Z, cause of death, blunt force trauma, manner, homicide. I did not say green tile or cracked 9. I did not say bud. I did not say rooms remember. The law has to be a smaller container than the world. That's how it holds anything at all. Afterward, in the hallway, Boyd leaned against a pillar like it was a person he trusted. "You did good," he said. "I told the parts that matter in court," I said. He nodded, then squinted at some middle distance. "You going to keep going by the lot?" "I'm going to keep doing my job." "Same thing," he said. Back at the office, Jules had left the washer on the counter where we'd started leaving it, a little token no one acknowledged. Next to it, she placed a pen cap, blue, snapped off some cheap ballpoint. I looked at her. She looked back like a cat who had knocked a glass off a table on purpose. "What?" she said. "I don't like tapping glass with my knuckles." I laughed, the kind that feels like a seam turned right side out, and then I didn't for a long time. When newly hired residents shadow me now, they ask for the story they've heard in the more interesting hallways. Did a man really sit up on your table and point to a room built 3 decades ago? Did you hear a dead pathologist's voice? Did a washer roll out of a drawer you swear you didn't place? I give them the answer that keeps their hands steady and their minds useful. A man revived briefly and described the old municipal morgue with details later confirmed by archival photos. His statement, paired with ordinary police work, helped close a case. I tell them to write what they see and stop there. If they listen the way good doctors do, I add quiet, rooms remember. One of them, a serious woman who will probably be better at this job than I am, caught me by the drain and asked, "What does the room remember about you?" I didn't answer. The right answers are shy. Maybe it will remember that I didn't tap the clock. Maybe it will remember lemon and patience. Maybe it will remember a voice that said, "I'll be careful," more times than anyone kept count. Maybe it will remember that on a night when the floor under my feet changed and Lysol walked in with tobacco and someone called me Bud, I stood still and didn't faint or laugh. Maybe that's enough. It is possible that nothing happened and I am telling you a well-made lie I've learned to believe because a man died and we needed him to mean more than a line on a report. It is possible that everything happened and I am understating it because I'm afraid of what naming it does to the part of me that counts steps and milliliters. I don't know. My job is not to know. My job is to be here and to keep being here, to let the clock cross its 7s while the world does what it does. When I lock the theater last thing at night, I sometimes press 2 fingers to the glass of the clock and leave a print I later wipe. It's a private truce with a room that has been kind to me. I say the same 2 words I said in the cooler when the air shifted and the floor remembered squares. I'm here. The room does not answer. It doesn't need to. The minute hand moves. The drain waits. Somewhere, a photograph keeps a penny warm. Somewhere else, the lot where a room used to be holds the smell of the river and weeds pushing up through asphalt. Somewhere, a woman with a scar, sleeves up, taps a clock with a pen cap like a teacher, and a second hand obeys. I hold the door with my hip, switch off the light, and go, and the room continues to be a room, and the city continues to be a city, and the dead continue to teach what the living can stand to learn.